The Seventh Tower by Garth Nix. Book 2, Castle. Chapter 3. The crone mother led Mila and Tal along a short corridor into a huge chamber that Tal realized must once have been the main hold of the ship. A vast area, it was not well lit, and what light there was seemed to come from a mixture of sunstones, moth lamps, and glow jellies, an odd combination of color and illumination. To make it even stranger, Tal couldn't work out exactly where all the light was coming from. Most of the room was filled with what looked like a very strange playing board. As Tal paced along behind the crone, he estimated the board had to be 80 stretches long and 40 wide, since one of his paces was roughly equivalent to a stretch. The board, or whatever it was, occupied the entire middle section of the hold. Peering at it in the dim light, Tal saw that it was made up of many thousands of square tiles. There were 20 or 30 slipper-wearing ice carls moving around on it, shifting small models of ice ships, or, not quite so frequently, rearranging the tiles with different ones they brought to the board. The ice carls were all girls around Mila's age, which Tal guessed was close to his own, a bit under 14. They all wore indoor furs of the same white color, with similar patterns of black bars. Tal didn't know what sort of animal the furs came from. It wasn't the black, shiny Selski hide used in Mila's armor, or the soft brown Reska skin that lined his own gloves, and he hadn't seen the black and white pattern on any other ice carls. Arla's shield maidens wore black Selski hide breastplates, bracers, and greaves over white furs striped with silver. The girls were under the direction of 7 women, who sat in high-backed chairs of woven bone located at even intervals around the enormous playing board. The women were crones, Tal guessed. At least they all had the same telltale glow in their eyes, like the crone of the Far Raiders, or the woman who had sat in the background when they met the crone mother. Tal wondered how their eyes got so bright, and what happened to them when they became Mother Crones to make their eyes change again. The 7 crones seemed to be looking out into space, but every now and then one would crook her finger, and a girl would lightly cross the board and go to her. There would be a whispered conversation, then the girl would go back to the board and move a ship, or perhaps exchange one of the tiles, taking a replacement from one of a number of cabinets that lined the far wall. As they walked closer, the girls stopped whatever they were doing to acknowledge the Mother Crone by clapping their fists. When she stopped at the edge of the board, Tal went over to get a closer look. He saw that every tile was etched with faintly luminous symbols. Doing a quick estimation, Tal calculated that there were around 1,400 tiles, and 400 or 500 ship models. He also saw that at the very center of the board there was one model that was not a ship. It was a mountain, with a building on top of it, a building with 7 towers that glowed with tiny sunstone chips. Clearly it was the castle and the Mountain of Light. Below it was a model of the rune ship, covered in the same luminous lichens that grew on the real thing. "It's a map," Tal said suddenly. Each tile represented a certain area. He had no idea how big, and the symbols on it indicated the terrain, or perhaps the state of the ice. Each model was also unique, representing a different Icecarl clan and ship. Tal looked at Mila. She was staring at the girls with obvious longing. They had to be Shield Maiden cadets who had fulfilled their quest and begun their training. They were what Mila wanted to be, with all her heart. "We call it the Reckoner. It is a map of sorts," said the Mother Crone. "Look closely at the ships, Tal." He peered at some of the closer ones. They were carved out of translucent bone, or maybe stone. The light actually came from inside the vessels. Some were filled with luminous moths, some with glow jellies, and some with a tiny sunstone fragment. Tal wasn't sure what this meant, but fewer than 40 in 100 ships were lit by sunstones. "Once, nearly every clan had a sunstone," said the Mother Crone. "Now it is as you see." "How do you know?" asked Tal. Then he looked at the girls, moving ships from one tile to the next. "You mean this Reckoner actually shows where all of the ships are right now? And whether they've got a sunstone?" "And the conditions of the ice," Mila added, staring at the table with rapt attention. "Among other things." "But how?" Tal asked, alarmed. If there really were that many ships, there were far more ice carls than he'd suspected, and they must have powerful magic to know where every ship was. What one crone sees, all may see, waking or sleeping, said the Mother Crone. And all clans have at least one crone. We Icecarls are not without power, Tal. Remember that when you return to the castle. I'll remember, said Tal quickly. But he wasn't really concerned with Icecarl magic. He'd just heard words that were much more magical to him than crones who could see through one another's eyes. When you return to the castle. But when can I go? And how do I get there? This ship is not the only ruin that can be found on the Mountain of Light, the Mother Crone answered. There was once a road that went from base to crown. Most of it has long since crumbled, and it no longer goes anywhere near the top. But even ruined, it will make your way easier until you can enter the castle by other ways. Other ways? Tal didn't like the sound of that. It made getting back to the castle sound difficult, but even worse was the thought that the Icecarls might know secret ways into his home. To cover up how disturbed he was, he scratched under his eye, covering his expression with his hand. I am not sure exactly what or where these ways are, but I know they exist, said the Mother Crone. She walked away from the reckoner and went to one of the cabinets, her fingers gently touching items on several shelves. Tal and Mila followed her, Mila still half watching the girls remove the ships and tiles. Ah, this is it, said the old woman, taking a small and very dusty bag of Selski hide off the shelf and handing it to Tal. Open it. Tal opened the bag, sneezing as dust billowed from inside. There were two objects in there, a thin rectangle of bone no longer than his hand, and a magnifying glass with a gold rim. Long ago, the Mother Crone began, when I was a little older than one of these young shield maidens, a man was found near the rune ship, a man without a shadow. He had lost it, he said, and perhaps he had, though we noticed that he was afraid of all shadows, as if his own might return. He called himself a chosen from the castle of 7 towers, though he would say no more. We did not ask him to explain, for he was not the first stranger to come down the Mountain of Light. The memory of the crones is long. He stayed with us for many sleeps, carving away at that bone, using this glass to keep his work smaller and more secret. He never said exactly what it was, but I think it is a map, showing a way into your castle. Tal looked at the tablet of bone with more interest, and raised the magnifying glass to his eye. It was a strong one, so even in the bad light he could make out tiny drawings etched into the surface. There were characters there, too, writing so fine that it must have been carved with the sharpest of needles. Tal needed better light to see what it said, though the alphabet was the one commonly used in the castle, not the more complex runes used in the spirit world of Einar. Did he tell you his name? Asked Tal. What happened to him? We called him Longface, for when he first came, his eyebrows and much of his hair had been burned off, so that his forehead was tall and smooth as his chin. After he finished that carving, he grew weak and could not be healed. We gave him to the ice. Tal shuddered. The Icecarls were too keen to put anyone weak or useless out onto the ice. Tal had seen no old Icecarls, except for the crones. You may have Longface's map, said the Mother Crone, and any other supplies you need. Mila will have to rest for several days before you can go on, but after that, you are free to leave. If Mila returns with her sunstone, we will know that the time has come for Icecarls and Chosen to meet. If not, we shall look for other ways to find our knowledge and our sunstones. There was no menace in her voice, but Tal felt that this was a veiled threat. At first, he wasn't worried about it. The Icecarls were fierce, and the crones obviously had powers he did not understand, but they could never stand up to the light magic of the Chosen and the strength of their spirit shadows. But as he thought about it, Tal looked out at the reckoner again, and all the ships. There were an awful lot of them, perhaps close to 500, spread all over the world, fortunately, but they greatly outnumbered the Chosen. If they could get into the castle... Mila doesn't have to come, he said. "I could bring a sunstone back."
"You would return here?"
asked the Mother Crone, with a faint hint of a smile.
"I think it best if Mila does go with you and finds a sunstone herself."
"Sure," said Tal unhappily. He'd gotten used to traveling with Mila when she was wounded and quiet. He wasn't sure about traveling with her when she was healthy. He never knew what she was going to do, and he suspected that she would still like to kill him. In her mind, he had never been more than a trespasser who'd come up with a good excuse to save himself. Still, she had sworn an oath. He could probably trust her, at least until they got to the castle. Then Tal would have a whole new set of troubles.